Yo peeps, Sdafhaa here, and today we're going to be doing something new. I'm going to be doing a detailed draft analysis for the first game actually of MPL MY Season 13, which is between Homebois and Selangor Red Giants. We're going to go through the drafting process for both these teams, try and identify why did they ban heroes, why did they pick heroes, as well as how the dynamics of each lineup will match up with one another, and whether or not that ends up reflecting on what the end result of the series was. So starting things off here, we have game 1 of Homebois versus Selangor Red Giants here. The draft has already started a little bit off. We see Homebois banning the Angela, the Faramis, and the Ruby here. So these are all very generic heroes to make sure that they're able to team fight as well. And since they're trying to bait out the Nolan first pick, we can see here, they don't want the Angela and Faramis to go through because those are support heroes that can really save the teammates. Whereas on the opposite side, Selangor Red Giants did ban out the DETHRONED, Harif, and Matilda. Notice that there's a kind of an emphasis here on the Red Giant side that they don't want to play against really dominating early game heroes. Harif wins gold lane against most marksmen, DETHRONED wins EXP lane against most EXP laners, and Matilda is just a little bit too good to let go, especially if you are on the red side. We can see, I'm gonna pause real quick so that we can talk about the picks now, where Homebois did go for the Nolan Arlet first. Arlet is to keep their options open. I'm personally not the biggest fan of it, but it's a hero that can be flexed very easily into both roam and EXP positions, so I can see why Homebois would want to keep that open. Nolan, of course, it was let through, so they're definitely going to be picking it up here. Whereas Selangor Red Giants, they started with Valentina, Grok. Now, these two are both very flexible, like open-ended first picks. Basically, they're not going to be revealing anything about their draft right from the get-go here. Valentina is good into most matchups, Grok is good into most matchups, so that's great. What I do like is that they go for the Joy once they've solidified that, okay, they're gonna be playing against Nolan Vexana. As long as the Joy waits a little bit before entering the fight, there's actually not a lot of CC on the side of the Homebois that will be able to stop it. So that is going to be the priority here for the Homebois going to the second phase. Right now they are lacking in terms of crowd control to be able to deal with this Joy. And when you consider things like the Grok as well, it's even more important that they have a solid front line now that they have Vexana and Nolan already shown. I really like that Red Giants have decided to ban Hilda here, because now that they've revealed Joy, they basically use this third slot knowing that on the red side, that third slot is very hard to contest because you pick it and then you go straight into 2 more bans, so you can immediately remove heroes that would be big problems to them. And by taking out the Hilda here, it's very obvious now to the Homebois that this Joy is going to be going into the jungle here, right? So I would not be surprised if the Red Giants decided to get rid of more like early game dominance here or hard CC. Things like Franco, like Haja, like Cho. These are all heroes that are not the most meta nowadays, but just to make sure that the Joy, who I'm believing Skies is going to be playing, has a much more fun time, they are going to try and get rid of as much CC as possible. Like we mentioned, Homebois does need a little bit more crowd control. We see that they're banning out the Paquito here, so they're putting a little bit more focus onto that EXP lane. Neither side has picked up EXP lane just yet, but Homebois wants to keep the option open of Arlet still being flexed into both positions. And we do see the Cho getting banned out here, so a hero that would be able to very easily lock down Joy, and of course one of Zorn's comfort picks. So they're not going to let that through. So Red Giants being very respectful here, and the Homebois do decide to ban out the Phoveus, which makes sense because they have the Nolan and the Arlet. But you have to note that Red Giants themselves have Valentina and Joy. So if Homebois are getting rid of the Phoveus, they really need some solid, like, some really reliable lockdown here to be able to deal with the Red Giants side. And Red Giants are quite comfortable going into this because one of the best CC EXP laners nowadays, Ruby, is already gone. That's something we have to focus on. Red Giants go into the Barats. This creates a question whether or not Joy or Barats is going into the jungle, but because they focus so hard on getting rid of Hilda and Cho, I'm still pretty sure it's going to be Joy in the jungle regardless here. Barats means that Homebois needs a tank buster. They will most likely need to go carry or Claude here, because otherwise they don't have enough damage to take down both Grok and Barats at the same time. Especially since Vexana is most likely going to be threatened a lot of the time by Joy. That is the approach they need to be going in here. They need tank busters, most likely in the marksman position, and then they need an EXP laner that has a really reliable form of crowd control. I'm not sure who is left in the pool, but they do go for... Okay, carry is the tank buster, that's fine. CC is a little bit concerning. Yes, on paper, CC is a very good 1v1 matchup into the Barats, because it can be a bit difficult for Barats to catch up to her speed. But she's not very good against Joy. And again, not enough CC in this case. We have CC, but not enough CC, if you know what I mean. That's what I'm worried about from the Homebois, because right now their comp is a little bit of a skirmish front to back kind of situation. They don't have a really solid front line, right? Arlet and CC are both good frontliners, but not really main tank material. Not to mention that without a lot of setup and crowd control, they're very reliant on the Vexana Terrify or the Final Slash landing on key targets. And Joy and Grok, not Barats as well during his ult, have CC immunity. So this is already not a very good position for Homebois. If Red Giants go for a marksman here that has very solid like early to mid game scaling, then it'll be very easy for them to just run at the Homebois, especially if they're able to like invade the jungle level 1, because Nolan is not that strong level 1, neither is Arlet. If you invade with Barats, Joy, Grok, it's very difficult for them to do anything, and if they're able to start getting a snowball onto either the EXP or gold lane, it's gonna be very hard for Homebois to contest objectives. So now they're gonna be looking for their gold laner. You want someone that's gonna be able to straight up win lane against carry. Most marksmen can do pretty well there, like Brody is good, Ixia is good, Bruno is not too bad, but I think you want a hero that has some form of defensive play, so like Brody's stun is good. Having Claude is still an option, but I feel like they want to go for early game, and we do see the Roger here. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are already talking about this Roger pick. Obviously, I'm making this recording after the game has already happened. We know how well this Roger performed. And the precise reason why is because he is able to fight into a lot of these heroes, right? And you can see that the way that Red Giants has drafted is to make it very difficult for Nolan to actually do anything. Like, one of the ways that a lot of teams are countering Nolan nowadays is they're letting it through, especially if they're playing on the red side. They let the blue side pick the Nolan, and then they draft a very tanky lineup along with side laners that are not vulnerable to being ganked. Roger is a bit of a high risk, high reward hero because he is very strong early to mid game, but if he doesn't get a snowball, it's very difficult for him to safely do damage in the late game because he doesn't have the same like range that other marksmen do. But as we see, Red Giants have a really strong early game composition. Their heroes are very hard to gank. There's not a lot of crowd control on the Homeboy side to be able to set up easy kills for Nolan and Vexana to start snowballing. So it's difficult AF to contest objectives here. I would just straight up say that Red Giants has won this draft already, and Homeboys, because they don't have a lot of bulk, they don't have a lot of crowd control, their damage is slow as well. The only burst damage they have is like Nolan at level 4 and Vexana once she has like 2 items. Otherwise, Carry and CC need time to output their damage. So if Red Giants dominate the early to mid game, they've already won, and as long as they don't really throw things out, then the late game is already theirs. And of course, like I mentioned, we are watching this after the fact, so we already know that what happened in this game was that Innocent just completely went out of control. I'll just skip forward to the very end, and we can see that Red Giants really emphasized on their early game dominance right from the get-go. Innocent 14-0, 20 kills to 0 on the side of the Red Giants. Right from the draft, we can see that Homeboys made their lives very difficult for themselves. And I think that's because they were not really able to respond to what Red Giants were doing and focused a little bit too hard on their own game plan during the first phase, only leaving like the final 2 slots to actually respawn. And I still don't really like the CC pick too much. I don't think it contributes very much to a team fight in this situation. So we're gonna move on now into the draft for game 2, where we can see what Homebois did end up learning from this situation and whether they did learn from this situation. So here's the draft for game number 2. Red Giants and Homebois have switched sides here, right? So Faramis is going to be their first ban. It does look like the blue side wants to ban out Faramis because these are both teams that like to fight a lot. They want to make sure that that second life from the Nether Realm is not just given for free. Homebois do get rid of the Nolan, so they don't feel comfortable enough in a position where they are the ones playing the tanky composition, which I feel like could be a detriment to them. If other teams notice this, then they're going to quite often pick up blue side against the Homeboy. So hopefully they were just trying out some kind of strategy and this is not an obvious weakness from the team. They also ban out Joy, so they're trying to eliminate these early game snowball high mobility heroes that Red Giants are quite skilled at playing. Red Giants, they get rid of their Valentina, which is very interesting. This is already telling that they want to play certain heroes with strong ultimates going into the draft. And then getting rid of the Harif again is a focus towards that gold lane. It does seem clear that Red Giants wants to make sure that Innocent has a good time. Because it's not just that Harif wins gold lane against most meta marksmen nowadays. It's also a comfort pick for Nets. So Coach Arcadia is paying a lot of respect towards the Homeboy side right now, which is understandable. They are the defending champions. But the defending champions are one game down right now, which is not a good situation for them to be in. They ban out the Angela. This is just a hero they don't seem to like playing against. But in that, they let go of the Matilda, which is, in my opinion, a pretty big mistake. Yums really loves the Matilda. It's one of his best heroes overall. And we already saw how dominating Selangor Red Giants were during the early game. If you give them more flexibility in the Guiding Winds and Circling Eagle, it's going to be very tough for them, especially if they pair it up with the Barats, you know, the classic flying dinosaur lineup here. Homeboy still sticking with a more flexible opening here, which I'm not really a fan of. I don't really, like, normally on the red side, in this first pick, you don't want to reveal your direction to the opposite side so early on. That makes sense. But neither Fredrin nor Arlen are particularly good at dealing with Matilda. I'd ideally want a hero that has a little bit more early game presence. And speaking of early game presence, we immediately see the Nana picked up by Stormy. So the good CC, good damage, and then yep, there's the Barats coming out, the Flying Dinosaur pickup. Excellent matchup into the Fredrin. This is one of the junglers that Fredrin really cannot deal with. And one of the weaknesses of Barats is instantly counteracted just by having Matilda on the map to like pull him out of sticky situations. Homeboys then goes into the Novaria. So here is what we can immediately see from the draft right now, right? Fredrin, Arlet, Novaria. This is a peel composition. Fredrin and Arlet, their job is to slow down the fight for Novaria to like whittle people down with sniping. And it does make sense, right? As long as Fredrin and Arlet can survive by healing up and life stealing, it won't be difficult for them to prolong fights, but it does mean that they are weaker to team compositions that want to directly dive them, right? Team comps that can just snowball run at them without too much fear. That's why they do get rid of the Roger. It's not just that Innocent went like 14-1 last game with it. It's a marksman hero that's very good at dealing with peel compositions because he has a lot of inbuilt damage with his passive between the human and the wolf form. And the invincibility frames, which saved him from a lot of situations last game, are very difficult to deal with if you're relying quite heavily on Arlet to be your form of crowd control. Selangor Red Giants get rid of the Grok. Again, they do seem to be focusing quite hard onto that early game phase, right? As long as they're able to get a snowball, it's very difficult for Homeboys to make that comeback if they don't have the correct picks for it. And in this case, we see that Homeboys get rid of the Ixia as well, just to make sure that you don't have another combo with the Matilda where you pull out the full barrage, Matilda pulls you forward, and then you're able to do more damage without needing to expend your flicker. But I do worry if they've over-invested in that regard here, because now they don't really have any bans to be able to take out like EXP laners that could dive the back line, right? When you're playing a peel composition here, you really need to make sure that the opponent is playing like a front to back. You want them to run at you as a 5-man with the tanks in front and the DPS behind, so that you can slowly poke them down from afar, or you can pick up an EXP laner yourselves that can cut off the backline and make it so that you can take advantage of your front line, slowing the fight down. Unfortunately, in this case, they've not done that. They've gone for the Bruno. This is mainly to make sure that the early game is still strong for them. They realize that it's very important to not pick a gold lane that just straight up loses, especially when the rest of their composition is a little bit on the slower side to start scaling up. So it's understandable they go for the Bruno here since Harif is already gone. And I don't think there's a lot of gold laners that just directly win. Brody might be one of them, but he wouldn't be quite as good against like the Arlet and the Novaria. So I imagine that Red Giants would want to go for a different hero in the gold lane here. They grab the Yuzong, which is great. Like, it's a hero that can dive that backline, catch up to Novaria, and then they go for the carry to counteract the Fredrin, as well as if the Arlet does go for a tank build, which usually Zorn on the Roam Arlet will go for a tank build. It's indirectly trying to force them to play the Arlet in the EXP lane, which would not be a good matchup for Yuzong. This is already an excellent composition for the Red Giants, right? Because they have a front to back, but they have the Yuzong to dive the back line and split up the team fight. Homebois wanting to play a peel lineup is particularly weak to heroes that can dive the back line. Because when you have your frontliners in front and your backliners behind, you want to make sure no one gets in between, because that completely disrupts the way that you want to take your team fights. Unfortunately, the Yuzong does do that. They need an EXP laner that can deal with that somehow, maybe dive their backline instead. X4 doesn't do a bad job because he can peel along with Arlet and Fredrin, and he can also dive the backline with Last Insanity, but I personally may have preferred something like the Benedetta here, maybe, since it could catch up to the backline, try and keep up with Guiding Winds, and make it so that it's very difficult for Cram on the Yuzong to just dive into the backline without needing to care about his own DPSs. Unfortunately, this comp from Homebois is particularly weak to the draft that Red Giants have come out with, where we have a front to back with some dive against basically a full peel composition. A peel composition is very slow at taking team fights. They want to slow down the fights to their own tempo, but Red Giants are so good at running people down with this draft, right? And I think we did already see it during the game itself. They're able to pressure right from the get-go, 7 kills to 0 at the start, and then at the end, they are able to win out the game once again without too much competition overall. So I do feel like Homebois needs to work on their drafting a little bit. I feel like their early game is trying to be too open-ended, and then their early draft is a bit too open-ended, and then their late draft is too responsive, and even then, not really pulling out the correct answers. As a result, our defending champions end up getting swept 2-0 in the very first match of the season. Not a very good look, but hey, we still got 6 weeks of regular season, so anything can happen, but Selangor Red Giants instantly proving my predictions earlier in the season wrong, and I'm very excited to see what else they have to say, what else they're going to be bringing to the table throughout the rest of the regular season. That's all for my draft analysis today here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. It's my first time doing this. If you guys want to see more, make sure you guys drop a like, a subscribe, and comment below if there's any other matches you want to see me do draft analysis for. And I'll see you guys in the next video.